All right, my name is Darci Stone, and last year I won the grand prize for Writers of the Future, so that was kind of fun.
That is a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
I'm also married to Eric James Stone, who this is how I got into writing, and I teach high school math and science. So
I have a loud German voice, so if you can't hear me in the back, I can talk louder. I'm good without the mic. So my name is Lynette White. I have 18 stories dispersed through 11 anthologies. I have a progressive fantasy that I wrote with 4 other authors that to this very day we've never even been in the same state. I'll go in more into that tomorrow on the collaborative panel. And then I have my own dark fantasy series. I also am a moderator for a online flash fiction group called 750 Word Group. And I was going to say I had 2 honorable mentions in Writers of the Future, but she kind of stole my thunder there. I feel very unworthy now.
Now, I was going to say they should both be proud because that's a really super competitive contest with a lot of really, really good writers and some really good judges. So an honorable mention is awesome.
That's a big deal.
Twice.
That's huge. That's huge. No, because they get hundreds and hundreds of good stories nominated, and winning it's gigantic. That's awesome. So good for you guys. No, I'm Larry Correia. I am best known for the Monster Hunter International series. I just got back from book tour for House of Assassins. This is my 21st novel. Multiple New York Times bestsellers, bunch of short fiction collections, novels, all sorts of stuff, game stuff. So I do a lot, and I do like theme in fiction. I just am very adamant that entertainment has to come first, and then we try to sneak the big brain stuff in after.
Okay, so my first question for you, for the 3 of you, is what are the benefits and the reasons for putting in very hard topics and themes into your fiction? Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, I
Hey, Darci, I'll just give this to you.
yeah.
No one's ever accused me of being quiet.
See,
Me either.
well, and she's German, and I used to be a firearms instructor, so you talk from the chest.
And I used to work with
Yep.
him.
We did. This poor guy spent a year in a room with me. He's deaf. No, so for me, honestly, I love having big theme stuff, and I got this reputation because I went on a kind of a kick a few years ago about being message fiction, anti-message fiction. I'm really not anti-message fiction. I believe message fiction is fine. However, you got to entertain people first. The big thing is you can't just club readers over the head with like, this is our special message, because that just feels like an after-school special, and people don't like that. Readers don't like that, so you got to be kind of cool about it. So if you have like a thing that you want to sneak in there, you have like a big theme or a message or something, or a drum that you want to pound, you can do it, but you just have to be careful. You have to entertain them more than you do that. And I've tackled some big stuff just because there are issues that I feel strong about. A lot of my books touch upon, concepts like liberty and freedom, free agency, individual expression. The Grim Noir story the Grim Noir Chronicles really boils down to, do the people own their government or does the government own the people? Really, it's a story about tyranny. My current series, the one I'm on tour for, is about a world with caste systems and this all-consuming law that shoves individuality aside. Everybody has a place in this society. But at the same time, it's all about sword fights and demons and stuff first, Then I get that stuff in afterwards. You can't preach harder than you can entertain, I think is the Jim Butcher quote. So, but yeah, I love sticking big themes in. I mean, that's our job as writers. We can have a lot of fun with this. We can tell a lot of big messages, but we got to do it. We can't be ham-fisted about it.
I guess my first question is, and I'm asking this question because when I first started writing, I honestly didn't understand the difference. Is the difference between a plot and a theme? They are 2 entirely different principles. So everybody understand the difference? If not, don't be afraid to raise your hand. We'll take a minute to explain it. We're good? Okay, so I'm all for themes. I'm actually pretty well known for putting themes in my flash fiction. And people that read my work are looking for what it is that I'm trying to tell them. So I'm all about it. I'm really not generally hard-fisted about it. But I think it just gives the story depth. I really do.
Yeah, and along those lines, I think, for example, when you eat cotton candy, right, it's like 2 seconds of amazing sugary goodness and then it's gone. Like, if you don't have some kind of theme in your story, then you're writing cotton candy, right? It's fun, maybe someone will enjoy reading it, they'll set it down and they won't remember anything about it. There was no purpose to your story. There was no bigger why. And so sometimes you just want cotton candy, and that's great. I think there are entire genres out there. Like, there's a lot of romance novels that they're made to be cotton candy. That's what you want, right? But if you want your if you want your story to stick with the reader after they put it down, then you need a theme in there, something bigger that gives your story purpose. But I agree with Larry completely that I've been frustrated sometimes when I've read something by an author that, like, I really enjoy this author, but sometimes I find that the plot is suffering because they wanted a message, and so the story wasn't very good, and that can be very frustrating as a reader, because I'm fine with listening to your message, but you better give me a story, and that's why I picked up your book, is for a good story. So,
Absolutely.
So Darci, when you're reading books and you're writing, and you encounter themes that are in complete opposition to what you personally believe, how are you able to, let's do writing. How are you able to portray a point of view that you are completely opposed to realistically in a piece of fiction?
one thing I think that's helpful is, especially if you're writing something that you don't already, agree with, is find people that do have that other point of view and talk a lot to them. Try to understand why they feel that way, why they think that way, so that when you create characters or present those themes, you're doing so with a little bit of, actual real world experience. And I think it's important, if you do have a theme in your book, make sure that you're presenting it three-dimensionally. And what I mean by that is there should be characters presenting it from different angles, the pros, the cons. If you just present it one-dimensionally, it's going to come across as preachy.
Yep.
And the problem with a preachy book is the only people that are going to buy it are people that already agree with you. So you're preaching to the choir. There might be readers that are like, oh, I loved your book, but it's what they're really saying is, I already share your point of view, and you just reinforced it in me. Thank you. And that's the opposite of depth. So you really want to get those three dimensions of, there's multiple facets to any issue. So.
Oh, if you're still thinking, I actually, on that, it's really important for your antagonists and your people that disagree with whatever your heroes are trying to do, is you got to have some nuance in there. Because one of the things that kills people on fiction, and you see this in books all the time, and you see this on TV shows all the time, where the bad guys or the people who are the antithesis of the heroes are cardboard cutouts. They're like really lame and really stupid. And if you're getting into contemporary issues, be real careful when you do that, because if your villains are all lame and stupid, but they also represent half the country, then you just pissed off half your readers, and it's completely pointless, and also makes your story really weak. And I know we got a lot of people here from Utah, but how many times have we seen something in fiction where people from Utah are portrayed as backwoods, religiously superstitious morons? Okay, we live in a place that has like the best economy in America, with their own little super tech empire. We're the highest educated people in America, yet we're portrayed routinely as bumpkins, and it's annoying, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, no, but it's terrible. It's a shit, but that's
To be
it's
fair,
just.
I do know some bumpkins as well.
Oh yeah,
I'm right here.
I mean, I own my bumpkinhood. I'm proud of it, right? No, but the thing is, but we see that it's us, and we get offended, right? We're like, oh, that's just crap. That's just lazy writing. But how do you write about other people and other groups and other belief systems that you personally aren't familiar with?
You know, and since I love doing themes in my series, I actually took everything in my comfort zone and I completely shredded it. So the cultures and everything in my series is really direct opposite of what I'm comfortable with. And but I wanted the challenge. And in the process of writing it, I have learned I'm pretty cool. but I had to do the research and I had to create characters that were really totally opposite of what I would think a character would be. So like the protagonist is really not what you would anticipate being a protagonist. So the hero of the story is one that you would ideally think was a villain, and the villain is the one that should have been the hero. So it's completely opposite. And for me, it was a fun challenge because then I had to put the different themes in there that was totally opposite of what my mindset was.
One big thing on this too is this gets kind of nuts and bolts rather than big picture. If you're having competing philosophies clashing in a book, make sure that the people who espouse those philosophies are good characters. Because a lot of times where this falls apart is bad character writing. So if you set it up where one side is obviously brilliant and smart and good and righteous and the other side is just a bunch of dummies, then that's weak. That's weak writing. But like, so when I'm writing my stuff and like I have a theme and it's like tyranny versus freedom, I'm not going to make all the tyrannical people be douchebags. I'm going to have there's a reason for them doing what they do. I'm going to make the bad guy leader charismatic. I'm going to make him have a goal and a point and a purpose. And so even if you disagree with him, even if you're like rooting for the people whose villages are getting massacred, you're still going to look at that bad guy and be like, okay, I see his point. And if you can write your opposing viewpoint as I can see the point and not do them as cardboard characters, then all of a sudden you got a lot more compelling argument for your pro. So honestly, a lot of the stuff that we bag on as message fiction is just because it's lazy, it's ham-fisted. It's like here's my obvious stereotype. I'm going to beat you over the head with it. And it's funny, we only tend to really notice it when it's our ox getting gored. I mean, who in here's a gun nut? How do we get portrayed in the media? Yeah, a bunch of wackos, right? That said, I did just build a compound. But you guys get what I mean, right? And it's the same thing you could do with religious groups. And then sometimes that just comes across as lazy, hackneyed writing. You could do it with political groups. You can do it with anything. And we're talking contemporary right now, but if you're taking this out into a science fiction world where you're competing philosophies or things that don't even exist yet, it's the same thing. And so I think one reason like that a lot of people, in the original Star Wars root for the Empire. You know what I mean? Because they made a compelling reason. Not so much in the new ones because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's the same kind of thing. So you got good characters is the basis to building this stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
What has been the hardest challenge for each of you inserting theme into your fiction? I'll start with you, Lynette.
Actually, for me to really, really learn the skill of doing a theme is really why I joined the 750 Word Club 7 years ago when I came across it on Goodreads. If you really, really want to hone your skill and get a message across, do it in 750 words. Going from that to even 10,000, 25,000 into a series, you can expand your skill, but to actually narrow it down and develop it, that's been the hardest thing for me to do, but it has been the best thing for me to really, really get my skill down.
I think even the way you phrased it, like how do you insert theme into your fiction, is a misconception, because if you're going back to your story and trying to insert theme, like it's never going to feel organic or authentic. The theme really needs to kind of grow with your story to feel natural. So 2 mistakes that I see writers make. One is you start with a theme and you're like, okay, this is my message. Now I need to come up with a story.
Yep.
If you do that, it's really hard to end up with a good story. And the other mistake I see is people write a story and then they're like, now I'm going to go back and Frankenstein. I'm just going to like try to insert a theme where it doesn't naturally fit. And you can see that when you read a story. So it's okay to go into your story with kind of a big idea of I would like this message to come across. But as you're writing your story, you're going to find that the theme it should grow naturally with your characters, with your plot. It should be just part of what's happening. An example, like, so my story that won at Writers of the Future, I actually began with, like, there was a message I wanted to make, and I sat down and I was like, this story is going to tell this message. And when I got to the end, I couldn't end it the way I originally planned, because as I had got to know the characters, I was like, no, that's not what they would do. That's not what would happen next. And so my original message totally got lost in favor of what became a story that I think was much more powerful than I had originally planned. But I had to be willing to let go of that original cookie cutter I had set for myself and let the story grow into what it wanted to be.
And I want, because you had mentioned doing the character first, I'm a firm believer that when you start a story, like she was mentioning, I had a theme that I wanted to do. I really think that's got to be the core. And then you need to develop your characters and your story around it, because it does have to grow with it. It has to be organic. If you want to do a theme, let your characters teach it. You can't just randomly insert something into a story and say, okay, that's my theme. That will kill your story in a heartbeat.
I think those fantastic points there. You got to be organic. You can't be clumsy about it. You got to write your story first, and the theme will happen. I mean, obviously, you can go in with goals and intent, but the story is the important thing. So I think you guys that is absolutely spot on. Biggest thing that I would say a challenge to do, and just something you really got to watch out for, is don't over-insert something. And Darci hit on this a little bit with, and what I mean there is, you ever read a book, and then like it's almost an info dump will appear about some pet peeve subject topic. And the example that I saw used was many years ago. An editor was telling a story about a writer who, like, every book he would turn in, at some point there would be like a 2-page rant about prescription drug abuse, and it had nothing to do with like any of the book around it. Like it came up, and then he would just put in a 2-page. And so finally, the editor's like, "Dude, why don't you just write a book about that?" And so be careful shoehorning issues in.
Yep.
And the other thing I would say too, and this is a trap that new writers often fall into, is they often see these writing advice things. And one of the things I always say on these panels is the stuff that we tell you guys is not rules. They're suggestions. They're things we've done that work for us. There are very, very few rules in writing. As long as the readers like it, you're golden. Okay, you can break almost any rule that a professor will tell you. So beware when people give you checklists on this subject. They're like, well, if you want a big, important book, you need to do this, and this, and this, and this. And down that path lies madness. Because what will happen is that you guys will be writing to the checklist. And you're like, okay, I did this, and I did this, and I inserted this, And what happens is that creates a very stilted, crappy book.
Plus, you're going to lose your individuality, what makes you you.
Oh, yeah. And you see that a lot out there where people try to follow a trend, or people try to chase advice. No, you need to tell your own story, and the theme will happen.
Yeah. So Larry, is there a difference? Is the process different for using theme within a short story versus a novel?
No. No. And actually, yeah. It can be in that a short story just mechanically is an entirely different process. So, like for me personally, when I read a novel, it's going to be 120 to 200,000 words. Most of my novels are about 150,000 words. I'm going to have 5 or 6 pages of outline for a beginning, middle, end, character arcs, so on and so forth. A short story is only 5 to 10,000 words usually, and so for that, I'm not. And so a lot of times, if a theme creeps into a short story, it's because it was organic to the story that was being told. Not necessarily that I outlined it and planned it, if that makes sense. So, and I've done, I think, we actually added it up. I've done like 50-something short stories. I've sold like 50-something short stories. And they vary wildly because I write in like every genre. And so some do and some don't. And some that do exist entirely on accident. And others don't because it just didn't come up. Because short stories, oftentimes you're just telling one scene of a larger story and leaving the rest to their imagination. Other times the purpose of that short story, like Darci saying on her award-winning one, she set out with a goal in mind. So I think the answer is it depends.
Definitely. And like I said, when you're doing the 750 word or even the 10,000, like Larry was saying, you really don't have time or words to develop it. Where in a novel, you have a lot more time to develop your theme and integrate it into your story and give your characters the texture that they need. In a short story, you may have one character and 1 or 2 sentences to get your theme across. That's it. And so your story has got to be generated in a way where you are, if you really have a theme and you really want something that you want to say, that is very poignant and not preachy and still organic. So yes, it does take a lot more work to do it in a short story than it does in a novel.
My husband writes lots of short stories, and so he's the expert on this. But I will say that by its nature, a short story is not as much about plot as it is about an emotional punch. Because if you only have 750 words, no one is going to be wowed by this intricate plot you developed. Okay, you can't do that. But they're going to remember the way they felt after they read the last word. And so I don't know if it's exactly the same thing as theme, but I definitely think with a short story, there's usually some kind of an emotional message you're trying to convey to your reader. And I think that short fiction is actually better at that than some of the, long epic novels. I'm on a panel later today about Ray Bradbury and his short stories. And if you've read much of him, like so many of his stories, like you read the last sentence and it's just an overpowering emotional response that you have as a reader. And like, I think it's related to theme if you're just trying to convey that emotional message. So.
Well, another thing too is with a short story, they do need to be pithier. And another thing in a novel is you can develop multiple big ideas. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't have to be just one theme. In fact, usually a novel is not.
Multiple. You're going to have multiple that you're working on.
Or you could even have multiple different ones depending on which characters, which character outlook you're looking at. So, but on that note, though, I will plug your husband, Eric. Eric James Stone is probably one of the best short fiction authors alive.
Raise your hand, Eric.
Is he here? Oh, there he is. Dude's fantastic.
He's amazing.
He's really good.
Okay, let's see, what time is it? Okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and open it up to a few questions. Yeah, right here in the front.
In your experience, how do you tell when a theme is growing organically in your story or when you're accidentally inserting it bluntly?
That's a good question.
Okay, nuts and bolts answer on that. If it's just there and I'm not having to think about it, like I'm typing and I'm like, wow, this is cool, then it's just happening, and that's good. If I'm like in my head having to like buzz myself and correct myself, and like I'm mentally like, oh, I'm not checking all the boxes. Okay. That's bad.
Well, and I think too, your theme should be coming from your characters Like, if your character in that situation would be doing and saying what it's happening, that's a good sign. If you're like, how can I contrive a strange situation where my character is going to bring up this prescription drug misuse, then something's gone wrong.
There better be a reason why he's bringing it up. And reading it aloud, a lot of times you will catch stuff like that.
Yeah, I read all my stuff aloud. Another thing on that too is a lot of times it's really organic when you write it and you didn't intend to put a theme, and it's not till people are reading it and talking about it and reviewing it, they're like, wow, this really touches on the, you know, the subject of such and such. You're like, yeah.
And I have found if I read it aloud and I get a chill, it's good to go.
Yeah, you right here.
In the shirt.
That narrowed it down.
It's been a day.
One guy in a poncho just gets all disgusted and leaves.
So I've noticed in other forms of media, television started out with subtle themes, and nowadays they just smash you over the head with themes like crazy. And I've noticed Hollywood going in the same direction where themes used to be subtle, and now a lot of the bigger movies are starting to bash us over the head with themes. Do you worry about that happening in traditional and mainstream writing eventually? And what do you think causes that transformation over time?
That's why I watch Discovery Channel.
I think it's already.
It's happening.
Yeah, if you read a lot, yeah, it's epidemic, and sometimes it's bad. Like they just put a piece of ham in a sock and then beat you in the head with it. You know what I mean? It's bad. And honestly, the reasons are legion. There's many reasons. A lot of it's a societal pressure legion, where writers want to like feel important and they want to feel like they belong to something bigger than just themselves. A lot of times writers, we lose sight of the fact that we're entertainers first and foremost, and we want to be special. And don't get me wrong, you guys are all special, right? But no, really, at the end of the day, we're entertainers. But it's an epidemic amongst entertainers to feel like we're bigger than we are. And don't get me wrong, we can change lives, we can help people out, but again, only through putting the story first. But it's really easy to fall into that trap where people basically get big for their britches, and they screw up.
Yeah, and kind of going back to something Larry said earlier, one thing that really irritates me with modern media is the lazy way out, where if your good guy presents something, that's what makes, like, obviously that's the right point of view, that's the right theme, that's the right message, because my good guy said it. And if my bad guy has a point of view or a philosophy, it's clearly wrong because he's the bad guy. And that drives me crazy in media. So, like, if you really want me to believe your message, you're going to have to do more to convince me than just have it come from the good guy. Like, you've got to have something to justify it. My husband and I just finished watching the last season of Person of Interest.
I was thinking the same show as you were talking.
And I was so mad because I'm not convinced the good guys were right.
I know. Yeah.
And it really bothered me at the end. The only, like, I was just supposed to believe the good guys won because they were labeled the good guys. There was no other justification or convincing, and I think that's lazy.
And the reason I thought of the same show is because David Weber's a fan of it, and we were on a panel on the same topic, and David Weber also brought up Person of Interest.
I'm in good company.
Yeah, we all talked about it. Because David's brilliant. If you guys don't know David Weber, one of the best science fiction writers who's ever lived. And but we very specific because it was a show that did travel in gray, and it had big themes. And for a TV show, shockingly deep. So, oh, totally.
Although Manifest is a good second to that.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, Manifest is awesome.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
I just wanted to know what you guys thought of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. If how this one handles that theme. If you guys have read it.
I never even heard of it.
Yeah, I've read it. I mean, it's been a while, but I think just a lot of the Russian authors are good at just putting in a lot of very powerful and conflicting themes in their literature. So it definitely is not the, like, as the previous question, it's not one of those books where it's like, here's just a quick, easy theme that I'm going to hit you over the head with. It has a lot of, various themes that are well done. So if you haven't read it, it is a very powerful novel.
Blue shirt.
What do you think the role of the author is in drawing conclusions from themes for the reader?
I don't like to. I like to put the stories in a situation where I want my readers, when they're done reading my stories, I want them to be able to think about it and come to their own conclusions. I don't come to conclusions for them.
Yeah, I ain't your priest. No, honestly, I think when writers do that, it's kind of patronizing. It's kind of insulting. Because let's be honest, I have a lot of readers, and a lot of my readers are way smarter than I am. And just because I'm some dude who makes up imaginary adventure stories about imaginary people having a good time, doesn't mean that I have the right to tell somebody else they're stupid or wrong or should feel bad because they believe in the way they believe.
I think you got a question, right?
Okay. Okay, let me try. Sorry, I had it and then I kind of lost it for a second there. Some authors, like say Agatha Christie, her stories have a moral framework that even when characters think that the truth shouldn't come out because it'll be damaging, it always turns out to be a good thing at the end. And I don't know if that's a theme or if that's like a framework idea. Do you differentiate between those?
Yes and no. It can be, and I grew up reading Agatha Christie. I love her work. If that's the cultural, thing that you want to bring out, and that's your theme, is that culture, whatever that is, yes. But if it's part of the story where, the culture does this specific thing and really has nothing to do with, what the characters are thinking or doing, no.
One quick note on that is the difference between theme and audience expectations. There's like a moral audience expectation. So when you write a series, you kind of set the boundaries of what your series is about and what people can expect. And your audience starts to expect stuff within that framework. And you violate that framework at your own peril. So have you ever read a series and it's like the books are kind of like similar in like style or like moral code, and then one takes a wild divergence? It bugs you, doesn't it? It'd be like if you're watching a show with your kids and it's been PG every episode, and there's the hardcore porno episode. You'd be like, whoa, and you would should probably change the channel and be like, kids, cover your eyes.
Probably.
Well, I don't judge. I don't care.
But I think all of us has watched a TV series where suddenly it just like spins out of control and we quit watching it. We've all seen it, right? Why do we quit watching it? Because they lost that framework.
You violated the trust the audience had in you. So sometimes with stories like that, she kind of had this thing where people expected the truth to come out, and people expected that. And so if you violate that, like I did a thriller series where we resolved nothing. Like honestly, you look at like the big questions in the series because the characters didn't know. We never answered it. Like, who was behind this? And what did this mean? And no, they don't know. But we were okay with that, and the readers were okay with that because we never made that promise. You see, so it's all about. So that's not necessarily a theme question as much as that's just a business question.
But I do think the genre you're writing in will affect how you can use theme and sometimes limit you. Because if you are writing like a murder mystery, you are limited. Like if you have put in a lot of extra theme about global warming and how it's our fault, but ultimately it's a murder mystery, a lot of readers are going to be confused about why there's all this.
It's like the 2-page rant about prescription drugs.
Yeah.
It's like global warming in this case.
And so, they're definitely.
Unless global warming killed them, and that's why there's a murder mystery, then you run with it.
It was a polar bear all along.
Yeah, and there's ways you can do it, but you just need to be intelligent. Because Larry was saying there's expectations. If you pick up just like, if you're expecting cotton candy, and then you bite it and you're like, whoa, this is a hamburger? Some of your readers are really going to be upset by that.
Well, like when I'm doing my panel, and I do oftentimes a panel just writing action scenes, and that's one of the things I always say is it's audience expectations. So if you're like writing happy, fluffy, princess sparkle time adventure story, and then it turns into like one of the Saw movies, you violated audience expectations. So
let me go all the way in the back. Yeah, you.
I was wondering, do you think it's still possible in speculative fiction to actually imbue your theme into the character so that he actually represents the larger part of the theme as opposed to the character kind of pushing the theme toward the end of the book?
yes,
Yeah.
but be careful. Who was forced to read Scarlet Letter in high school? I notice I used the word forced. Because notice, there was the character of the kid, the daughter. She wasn't a character. She was a walking, beat you over the head message theme. She wasn't a functional human being at all. She was a literary device, and it sucked. And even you're 14 years old and you're not an expert on literature and you read this book, you recognize that, right? Even though you could probably at the time put it into words with what was wrong with it, you knew it sucked.
But then you have like Scout in Mockingbird. She was in herself a walking theme, and it was excellently done.
Yeah, or another one that comes to mind for me is like Sam in Lord of the Rings, right? Like he embodies very much a specific ideal and idea, but he was still a great character.
Oh yeah. So you can do it. Tread carefully though, and do it well. Like I said, that's true of like everything we do. Just do it good. That's our final like, don't suck.
Do it right. That's really the advice. Just do whatever you want. Just do it right.
Yeah, quit sucking.
What are some examples? We've talked a lot about stories with themes that you didn't end up feeling worked well. What are some examples of stories that you felt have presented themes really well in any medium, whether it's a TV show, a movie, a book, and why?
It was one of my early stories, actually. It was in the very first anthology that was done. And when I wrote the story, I really didn't intend it to end the way it did. But it's a story about a gang war going on in a park. And at the same time, there is an autistic child who is lost that gets caught in the middle of this gang war, and two rival gang members actually discover this kid. I'm not going to tell you how it ends. The book will be a sale tonight. But I realized, though, but the whole theme of that, it was not the gang members at all. It was the innocence of that child. And but that's the type of characters, and there's so many stories where it's done well. I can come up with a dozen just thinking about it.
So this is the one time you'll hear me talk, other than asking questions. Okay, and Larry knows this about me very much. I am very, very sensitive to how to the positives and the negatives and the double-edged sword of how law enforcement is portrayed within all medium. My dad was a cop. I grew up with cops. I've known more cops than just about, without knowing you individually, probably than everybody in this room. The author Michael Connolly, his stories have been adapted into the show Bosch, right? It's one of the few shows that illustrates individual heroism, small-time heroism, large-time heroism, the positives, the negatives, the hard parts, the cops who take it too far, the ones who are just good guys. It's one of the very few cop shows that I think gets it very, very right. And the reason that he gets that major theme right is because he was a beat reporter in LA. He talked with the people, as everyone has already talked about. He's done his research over and over and over and over again. And it makes his stuff viable. And it makes, in everything in his stories, at least the first 10 or 12 that I read, and in the show, it's all organic. And it's very realistic. That's my one point. Thank you for your patience.
Okay. There's 3 examples that come to mind that I want to mention. One is Watership Down. Like, it's a great story. It's a fun story, but there's so much thematically in there that's, deep. And I think it's ironic that we have children read it, because I really think you don't understand half of what that story is about until you've had a little more life experience. And then another one is the movie La Vita Belle, that Life is Beautiful. If anyone told you, like, hey, let's make a comedy about a Jewish concentration camp, you'd be like, you're insane. But it's, to me, one of the most beautifully powerful movies I've ever seen. And then the last one that comes to mind is her writing style can be kind of literary, which is off-putting sometimes. But I think Ursula Le Guin does a good job of having stories with powerful themes.
I thought it was Le Guin.
Le Guin, I don't know. It could be. It's one of those
I was
never
like,
said it out loud.
Because I've been saying it wrong
No,
for like 20 years.
I know.
Okay, never mind.
It's like quinoa. It's fine.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Maybe some of you comment on writing characters who are themselves conflicted over your major theme. In other words, the theme develops, and you've got a character who is trying to reconcile his own feelings about what that major overriding theme becomes. How do you write that?
Carefully.
What?
Carefully. The primary character in my series is dealing with just that. Very, very carefully.
I've actually, the series that I was on tour for right now, the main character starts out as basically a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's an evil dude. He does evil crap, but he has very good reasons for why he does what he does. And the story is about him being a person. Like, the whole freaking giant epic fantasy series is about this dude learning to be a decent human being. And he's not decent at all. He's horrible.
So you have to, in that situation, your character has to grow organically.
Yeah, you got to.
Resolve that conflict. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Well,
Right, yeah.
and the conflict is what the story is about. So the resolving the conflict, it just doesn't. You just don't flip a switch and it's like, oh, I'm a good guy now. You got to make it organic, and you got to have them go through experiences that make them question. And it's,
There's got to be a why, and
so.
your readers have to understand the why the transformation is taking place, or why the conflict is taking place.
And the next panel is coming in, so I think that's our clue that we're probably out of time.
We're being ousted.
We have 4 minutes. Michael Brent.
Yeah.
Okay, you're fine. They go to 45?
Yeah.
When did they change the rule on me? Bastards. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.